Hello everyone, in this video we will discuss about types of error. So first of all we need to understand what is types of error. So types of error while making inferences based on results from the sample. We cannot do so with 100% certainty or confidence when we are going to draw the results. So there is a chance of error. So for that error, words comes types of error. So here acceptance or rejection of the null hypothesis can be stated only with a certain amount of error or with a certain amount of confidence. For that point of view, we use to 100 minus error. So that errors is two types which is known as type 1 error or type 2 error. So here we need to understand what is type 1 error and what is type 2 error. So first of all, we'll define type 1 error. So type 1 error involves rejection of null hypothesis when it is actually true or finding an effect when actually there is no effect. It measures the strength of evidence by indicating the probability that a result at least as extreme as that observed would occur by chance when the null hypothesis is true. So it is represented as alpha, or we can say p-value, or we can say level of significance. And 1 minus alpha is called confidence coefficient, or we can say probability of accepting null hypothesis when it is true. In other way, a test of significance gives a p-value lower than the alpha label, the null hypothesis is rejected. So when we are calculating the data and p-value is coming less than alpha, alpha means level of significance. In that case, we will reject the null hypothesis. And a type 1 error means type 1 error is the mistake of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. So this is basic information of type 1 error. In other way, if we are going to test for a medical disease, the null hypothesis is usually the assumptions that person is healthy. So this is our assumption. Null hypothesis means person is healthy. So in that case, a type 1 error is known as false positive. So what is the meaning of false positive? Means a healthy person is diagnosed with the disease. So this is false positive. And the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true is equal to alpha level of the test. And if alpha value is coming equal to 0.05, in the long run we will incorrectly reject the null hypothesis when it is really true about 5% of the time. So now we'll talk about type 1 2 error. Type 2 error involves acceptance of null hypothesis when it is actually false or not finding. In other way, we can say not finding an effect when actually there is an effect. And type 2 error is represented noted by beta notation, and 1 minus beta is called the power of the test, or other way we can say probability of rejecting null hypothesis when it is false, or other way we can say probability of finding an effect when actually there is an effect. So type 2 error is made when we fail to reject the null hypothesis, when it is false and the alternative is true. So probability of type 2 error is noted by beta, and in medical testing for a disease, this would be equivalent to a person who has the disease being diagnosed as disease free. So type 2 error is known as false negative. So now another term is the label. Here we discuss type 1 error and type 2 error. Another term is label of significance, as we had discussed probability of committing type 2 error is called the label of significance, and it is denoted by alpha, and alpha is probability of type 1 error and probability of rejecting null hypothesis when null hypothesis is true. And in statistical way, if value is less than 0.05, less than 0.01 point, means it's a 5% level of confidence, 5% level of significance, or 10% level of significance. So this is the basic information about the level of significance. And another term is power of the test. So the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is false is defined as the power of the test. And power of the test, we can say mathematically probability of rejecting null hypothesis when alternative hypothesis is true. In other way, we can say probability of making a correct decision, and it is noted by mathematically 1 minus beta, where as we know beta is chance of type 2 error. And in other way we can say our ability to detect a false hypothesis is called the power of the test. And other way we can say the power of a test is the probability that it is correctly rejects a false null hypothesis. And as we know, power 1 minus probability of type 2 error. This is about power of the test. So, and one another term is the p-value. We need to understand what is the p-value, means probability value. So the p-value is the smallest level of significance at which null hypothesis would be rejected when a specified test procedure is used on a given data set. Specified test means it may be parametric or non-parametric test like t-test, chi-square test, is Manhattan test, and Kruskal-Wallis test. So like this specific test we need to understand here. And p-value is less than equal to alpha, null hypothesis would be reject at level of alpha, and p-value greater than alpha then will not reject null hypothesis at that level of the significance or alpha. Now here type 1 error, type 2 error, level of significance, power of the test, and p-value we have discussed separately, but all these points will discuss in this table. So once we know we have a clarity of this 2 cross 2 table, we can get all the information in one single slide. Like if we have a condition of null hypothesis is true and false, decision we are taking here, reject null hypothesis, accept null hypothesis. So how will define type 1 error, type 2 error, power of the test, and level of significance. So once we are rejecting the null hypothesis, when null hypothesis is true, then it is known as the type 1 error, and probability of type 1 error is known as level of significance, which is noted by alpha, and it is also known as the p-value. So there in this box we can understand type 1 error, level of significance and p-value. And this is the correct 1 minus beta, as we said, probability of rejecting null hypothesis. When null hypothesis is false, that is known as the power of the test. In another second row, except null hypothesis, when null hypothesis is true, this is the correct decision. This is the 1 minus alpha and it is known as the confidence coefficient. And accepting null hypothesis, when null hypothesis is false, that is known as the type 2 error. Type 2 error is noted by beta, or we can say probability of type 2 error is beta. So here we can understand type 1 error, type 2 error, and level of significance, p-value, power of the test, confidence coefficients. So this one single slide is sufficient for uh, all the points which we had discussed already in these slides. Now one another points, whatever we have discussed previously, everything we can discuss with help of this picture. This picture is known as the normal curve. This area covers the 95% of all values, and this area covers the 5% of all values. As we said, reject null hypothesis, if we are calculating the value and by that probability value is coming in that area, and then we'll reject the null hypothesis. And if value is greater than 5% level, if it is coming here, then we'll do not reject the null hypothesis. And this point known as the critical value. This is about the normal curve, which covered all the concept here which we had discussed in previous slide. And this is one important point. If we are getting the value p value less than 0.01, that is known as the very highly significant. And if p value lies between 0.001 less than 0.01, it's known as highly significant. And p lies between 0.01 to 0.05, it's known as significant. If p value is greater than 0.05, it is known as not significant. And one last slide, which is very important, all the things we have uh, uh, find out here. If our study is 95% confidence, then z coefficient would be the minus 1.96 to plus 1.96. And if it is the 10% level of significance, then coefficient z coefficient would be 2.58. And if it is the 99.9% confidence then value, then it would be minus 3.302 plus 3.30. This is about type 1 error, type 2 error, level of significance, power of the test, and p value. So thank you.